My name is Florence May Alder. I am 84 years old. I live alone now, in a quiet town called Maple Hollow, just outside Kentucky. People here think I'm just another old lady with a garden, a cane, and a lifetime of secrets. But the truth is heavier than silence. And mine has waited long enough. For decades, I buried this story under layers of Sunday smiles, quiet dinners, and polite nods. But today I'm going to say what I should have said back then, when it first happened. When the man who should have protected me chose to hurt me. His name was Clinton Alder, my husband's father. He abused me 3 times during our Christmas visits. And no one believed me. Not even my husband. But before I tell you what happened, I want to welcome you to my story. You're here now and I hope you stay. Please take a second to subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Give this story a like so more people can hear it. And drop a comment below telling me what part of the country you're watching from. I want to know who's sitting with me as I finally speak the truth. Because this story isn't just mine. It could be your mother's, your aunt's, your neighbor's, or even yours. It started in December of 1965. My husband, Edgar, and I had been married for 3 years. We had just moved into a small 2-bedroom rental outside Louisville. I was 24, young and hopeful, trying to build a home from scratch. Every December, we'd visit Edgar's parents for Christmas. They lived in a big white farmhouse surrounded by bare trees and frostbitten land. It was always cold, but Clinton's voice made the air even colder. He was a decorated veteran, a man with strong hands, a commanding voice, and a presence that filled every room before his feet even crossed the door. The women in the family didn't speak when Clinton entered a room. They just nodded and kept busy. That first Christmas, I noticed something was off. He hugged me too long, held my waist a little too tightly. And when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see warmth. I saw warning. But I was young, and in love, and pregnant with Elijah, our first child. I told myself I was overthinking it. Until the second night of our visit. That's when it happened. The first time. It was late. Everyone had gone to bed. Edgar was fast asleep next to me, snoring softly after a long day chopping wood with his father. I was downstairs getting a glass of milk. The old kitchen light flickered as I stood barefoot on the creaky wooden floor. And then, I heard him. Couldn't sleep. Turned. Clinton stood in the doorway. His belt was undone. I backed away slowly. I was just heading back to bed, I said. He stepped closer. He blocked the only way out. That was when he touched me. Rough, forceful. Like I didn't belong to myself anymore. He whispered things no daughter-in-law should ever hear. Things no woman should ever have to carry. Froze. I didn't scream. I don't know why. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I didn't want to wake Edgar and cause a fight. Maybe I thought if I stayed quiet, it would end faster. When he finally stepped away, he smiled like he'd just borrowed a cup of sugar. "Merry Christmas," he said, then walked back upstairs. Like nothing had happened. I stood there for a long time, shaking. My nightgown clung to my skin like it knew the shame I'd been forced to wear. I wanted to throw up. But instead I climbed the stairs, crawled back into bed beside Edgar, and laid awake in silence until the sun came up. The next morning, Clinton kissed my cheek at the breakfast table. Edgar didn't notice. But I flinched. That was the first time. The second came exactly 1 year later. And the third, the one that shattered everything, came when Elijah was just learning how to walk. But what broke me most wasn't Clinton's hands. It was Edgar's heart. Because when I finally found the courage to tell him, he looked me in the eye and said, "He would never do that. He's my father." I knew then. I was alone. Or so I thought. Because what I didn't know was that someone else had seen something. Someone I never expected. And what they said would change everything. I once believed secrets could be buried with silence. But secrets grow. They fester in dark corners. And when they finally break the surface, they don't just hurt you. They hurt the ones you love. My son, Elijah, was 5 years old when he heard something he was never meant to hear. And after that day, he never looked at his grandfather the same again. The third time Clinton touched me, it was Christmas of 1971. I remember because the snow came early that year, and Elijah had just gotten his first red winter coat. He looked like a little cherry walking across the yard, building snowmen with his father. Clinton was inside. So was I. Edgar had gone to town for kerosene. Elijah was still outside, bundled up. Or so I thought. Clinton came into the kitchen while I was drying dishes. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His eyes said it all. I backed against the sink. "No," I whispered. "Don't." But he didn't stop. And just as he grabbed my wrist, heard it, soft gasp. And when I turned, I saw Elijah standing in the doorway, holding his little snowman mitten, frozen, silent, watching his grandfather hurt his mother. And in that moment I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I screamed, loud, like a fire alarm in my soul had finally been pulled. Clinton stumbled back. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. Not shame, fear. Because someone had seen him. And that someone was a child. I rushed to Elijah, scooped him into my arms, and ran out of the house barefoot into the snow. Birdie, my best friend since we were girls, lived just 2 houses down. I didn't even knock. I barged in, Elijah crying into my neck, my hands trembling. She knew something was wrong the moment she saw my face. I told her everything. This time I didn't hold back. I told her about the kitchen, about the garage the year before, about the guest room the first year. She sat still for a long time. Then she said something I'll never forget. "He did the same thing to my cousin. In 1962. I stared at her. She nodded, tears in her eyes. She was too scared to say anything. We sat in silence, 2 broken women, breathing the same shattered air. And Elijah, he just kept saying one thing over and over. "Grandpa hurt Mama. Grandpa hurt Mama." When Edgar returned, Birdie and I were waiting. He walked into her house, holding a can of kerosene and a confused frown. "Where the hell have you been?" he asked. "You need to sit down," I said. He didn't. So I told him. I told him what Clinton had done. Again. Told him Elijah saw it. Told him Birdie knew someone else who had been hurt. But he didn't look at me. He looked at Elijah, who sat on the couch quietly coloring a picture of a snowman. "Elijah," Edgar said. "What did you see?" Elijah didn't speak. He just raised his drawing. It showed a tall man with angry eyes holding a woman by the wrist. Underneath he had scribbled, "Mama, me, Grandpa." Edgar's hands trembled. For the first time he believed me. But belief didn't mean courage. Because that night, instead of confronting his father, Edgar packed our things and drove us back home early. We left the gifts, tree, the turkey in the oven. We left it all. And we never returned to that house again. But silence followed us. I thought leaving was the end of it. I thought moving across the state and starting over would bring peace. But peace doesn't come when pain is still hidden. And even though Clinton never touched me again, he still watched me. He sent letters, called the house, drove by slowly when Elijah started school. He made sure I knew he wasn't gone. And the worst part, Edgar refused to speak of it. Not even once. He buried it so deep he pretended it never happened. And the more he buried it, the lonelier I became. Until one day, 5 years later, I opened the front door and found Clinton standing there, smiling, holding a Christmas present, like nothing had ever happened. And this time, I didn't scream. I didn't run. I invited him in. 'Cause I had a plan. And it started with that box in his hand. I pretended to forgive him, but I was recording everything. I don't believe in evil the way most people do. It doesn't always wear dark clothes and snarl. Sometimes it wears cologne, carries gifts, and says things like, "I just want to make peace." Clinton stood at my doorstep with a red box and that same fake warmth in his eyes. Elijah was at school. Edgar was at work. I was home alone. Exactly how Clinton liked it. But this time, I was ready. "May I come in?" he asked, holding the gift like a peace offering. I stepped aside. Let the door creak open just enough. 5 minutes, I said. That's all. The moment he crossed that threshold, something in me changed. I wasn't scared anymore. I was focused. The living room still smelled like cinnamon from the candles I'd lit earlier. Clinton sat on the edge of the couch, placing the box on the coffee table. He smiled. That same fake, fatherly smile that had haunted me for years. "I know we haven't spoken in a while," he said. "But it's Christmas. I wanted to see my grandson. And you." I sat across from him, arms folded, face still. "What do you want?" I asked. "Forgiveness." My stomach twisted. But I leaned in slowly and said, "Is that what you're here for, Clinton? You want me to forgive you for hurting me?" He looked surprised, then careful. He chuckled softly. "Florence, we've all made mistakes. I just think." Cut him off. "Say what you did." He paused. "I don't know what you're talking about." He was baiting me, waiting for me to yell, waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. Instead, I tapped the edge of the bookshelf beside me, right where the small tape recorder was hidden behind an old copy of Little Women. The red light blinked softly. I had turned it on the moment he walked in. Every word was being captured. His tone, his deflection, his denial, and eventually, his confession. "I told Edgar the truth years ago," I said calmly. "Elijah saw you grab me in the kitchen that night. You think he forgot?" Clinton shifted uncomfortably. That boy was 5 years old. Old enough to remember fear. He leaned back and exhaled. "You really going to hold one ugly night over my head for the rest of my life?" I blinked. "1." He nodded. "You said 3. But you and I both know." He stopped himself. And that was enough. My eyes didn't leave his. "You just confirmed it." He stood suddenly. But I didn't flinch. He walked to the door. "You've always been a bitter woman, Florence. You poisoned Edgar. Now you're poisoning that boy." "You did that yourself," I said. He hesitated like he wanted to say more. Then he opened the door and left, slamming it behind him. The tape kept rolling for a few more seconds. Then I pressed stop and placed the cassette in a small envelope labeled, "For Elijah, when he's old enough to understand." That night, I didn't tell Edgar Clinton had come by. I didn't tell Elijah either. I just made dinner, helped with homework, and went to bed knowing I had something powerful. Proof. And I wasn't going to let it collect dust. Over the next few months I kept gathering. Letters, voicemails, notes from Birdie about what her cousin remembered. I stored it all in a fireproof lockbox. Because I didn't trust the world to protect the truth. So I kept it myself. Like a soldier sharpening her weapon. But I knew that one day I'd need to use it. And that day came 2 years later. When Clinton died suddenly of a heart attack. And Edgar asked me, begged me, to attend the funeral. He said it would be the Christian thing to do. I went. Not for Clinton. But for the women in the pews who looked at me like they wanted to scream but didn't have the strength. I sat in the back. Elijah beside me. Birdie beside him. And I watched as people stood at the pulpit and called him a hero, a provider, a good man. I clenched my jaw through every lie. But when they asked if anyone wanted to say a few words, I stood, walked slowly to the front, looked at every face in that room. And I said, "Some people wear 2 faces, and some of us live long enough to survive both. I won't tell you who Clinton was to you, but I know who he was to me. And I won't let his memory erase my truth." Then I turned and walked out, and I never stepped foot in that church again. But that speech stirred something, because a week later, a woman came to my door. A woman I had never met before. Tears in her eyes, voice shaking, and what she said would unlock a secret that even I didn't know Clinton had buried. The woman who knocked on my door knew something about my son that I didn't. It was raining the morning she came. Not a soft drizzle, the kind that taps gently on the windows, but a storm. Hard, relentless rain. The kind that soaks the ground and dares you to step outside. I was in the kitchen making cornbread when I heard the knock. Not rushed, not afraid, just steady. 3 times. When I opened the door I saw her. Mid-30s. Soaked to the bone. A blue scarf tied around her head. Eyes red like she hadn't slept in days. "Mrs. Alder?" she asked softly. "Yes." She clutched a leather folder to her chest. "My name is Lacey. Lacey Drew. I know this is strange, but I need to speak to you. It's about Clinton. And your son." I stared at her. Elijah was 20 now. He was away at college, studying literature in Cincinnati. He called often, always asked if I needed groceries or if Bertie's knees were acting up. He was the best thing I'd ever done. So the moment I heard someone mention my son's name, I let her in. We sat in the parlor. The storm outside raged, but the silence in the room was louder. She set the folder on her lap and looked at me with a kind of hesitation I'd only seen in women who've held something in for too long. "I read about you," she said. "In a local blog. A woman wrote about your funeral speech. How brave it was." I said nothing. She took a breath. "I think Clinton hurt me too." The room felt smaller. "Not directly," she added. "But what he did changed the course of my life." She opened the folder. Inside were photos, documents, letters, and a birth certificate. "Elijah," she whispered, pushing the document toward me, "has a half-brother." I blinked. "What?" She nodded. "My mother, her name was Marla Drew. She was 15 when she cleaned the church floors. Clinton was one of the church elders back then. Said she was special. Said he'd help our family with bills." I swallowed. "I was born in 1973, she continued. "Clinton never claimed me. Never paid. But my mother knew. She kept letters he wrote her. Promises. And the results of a paternity test she paid for with borrowed money." I leaned forward, my hand shaking as I pulled the paper from the folder. The name was clear. Clinton W. Alder, 99.9% match. Lacey sat straighter. He ruined her. She drank herself into the grave. I grew up in foster care. But she told me his name. She told me if I ever found myself strong enough to look for you. Because you were the only one who ever stood up to him. My throat tightened. "I didn't come for money," she said quickly. "I don't want anything from you. But Elijah, he has a brother. And I thought maybe he should know." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the girl who was, in some terrible, twisted way, family. A daughter born from pain. From silence. From Clinton's hand and Marla's stolen youth. And the thing that haunted me most was how much Lacey looked like Elijah around the eyes. Same depth. Same pain. Same quiet fire. "What do you want to happen next?" finally asked. I shrugged. "That's not for me to say." But I didn't want the truth to rot in another folder. He nodded. "Then let's not let it rot," I said. "Let's clean it. Piece by piece." Lacey stayed the night. The storm knocked out the lights, so we lit candles and sat on the porch. She told me about foster homes. About a man she loved who left when she told him her story. About the daughter she'd named Hope, because she didn't want pain to be the end of her line. And I told her about Elijah. About how he carried shame he didn't deserve. How he still sometimes asked why his grandfather never came to his baseball games. We were two women, tethered by a man neither of us invited into our stories. But somehow, still healing each other. A week later I called Elijah. Told him to come home for the weekend. "I've got someone I want you to meet," I said. He arrived Saturday morning. Right, taller than I remembered. Carrying a bag of oranges and a book of poetry. And when he walked into the living room and saw Lacey sitting on the couch, he froze. He looked at me, then at her, then back at me. And I said, "Elijah, this is your sister." First he thought it was a joke. Cruel, confusing prank. But when Lacey handed him the folder, and he read the truth for himself, he sat down hard, staring at the ceiling like it had answers. He didn't say anything for a long time, just held the birth certificate, then finally whispered, "Does this mean I have a niece?" Lacey nodded. "She's 6. Her name's Hope." And for the first time since Clinton died, I saw something in Elijah's eyes I hadn't seen in years. Later that evening, he took a walk with Lacey down the old road behind the house. They were gone for 2 hours. When they came back, his face was still tight, but his shoulders were looser. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "Thanks for telling me, Mama." I didn't ask what they talked about. I didn't need to know, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the only one holding pieces of a broken truth. I had passed the torch. And Elijah, he was strong enough to carry it. But just as we were starting to feel whole again, a letter arrived in the mailbox, from someone I thought was long gone, and the message inside threatened to undo everything we had rebuilt. The letter from the man who should have stayed dead. Some ghosts don't need a heartbeat to haunt you, they just need a pen, and an envelope, and enough cruelty to reach you from the grave. It had been over a year since Clinton died. A year since I stood in the back pew of his funeral and walked away from his name forever. Or so I thought. But pain, it has a way of circling back. And this time, it came in a cream-colored envelope with no return address, postmarked from Louisiana. Inside was a single page. Cold, precise. To Florence, the bitter wife. If you're reading this, then my arrangements went as planned. You thought you buried me with nothing but shame, but like always, you forgot who I am. You were never the only one who knew what I did. You just had the loudest voice. But the others, the quiet ones, I made sure they knew silence had a price. And your son, I hope he enjoyed that little folder of lies. Because truth is slippery. And what he finds next might break him in a way even you can't fix. I left something behind. Something only you can find. Something he'll want answers for. It's all waiting in the safe. Same code you used on the day you left me. Don't worry. You'll remember. See. I dropped the paper. The room tilted. For a second I couldn't breathe. Not because I was scared, but because I knew exactly what he meant. Safe. It sat in the back of the garage, covered with tarps and paint cans. I hadn't opened it in nearly 30 years. Not since the night I packed my things and left Clinton's house for good. Back then I'd used a simple code, Elijah's birthday. April 14, 1968. 041468. I remember punching it in with shaking hands as I stuffed my passport, savings, and the only photo I had of my mother into a bag before driving away into the cold. I hadn't thought about that safe in decades. But now, it was calling again. I didn't go alone. I brought Birdie. And I brought Lacey. I didn't tell Elijah. Not yet. Because whatever Clinton had left for me, I didn't want it to break my son before I had a chance to understand it. The garage was still standing behind the old Alda house. No one had lived there since Clinton died. The bank was set to seize it in the spring, but the keys still worked. Probably because no one cared enough to change the locks. We pulled the tarp aside. There it was. Same gray steel. Same rusted handle. He knelt. Typed in the code. 414,168. The lock clicked. He hesitated. Then opened it. Inside. Black notebook. A thick manila envelope. And a flash drive wrapped in rubber bands. I took them all and shut the door. Birdie held my hand the whole time. We went back to my house and sat at the dining table as the rain tapped against the windows. I opened the notebook first. It wasn't written by Clinton. It was written about him. By someone else. Page after page of notes, dates, locations, payments. It looked like a journal from someone tracking him. Following his movements. Recording his meetings with young girls and underage women across towns in Kentucky and Tennessee. Some of the names were familiar. Some I didn't recognize. Then I saw one that made my heart stop. Marla Drew. Lacey leaned over my shoulder. "That's my mother," she whispered. And next to Marla's name was a dollar amount. Payment. It was dated 3 months after she got pregnant. And then came the word that made my stomach turn. Silenced. I opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, most old, faded. Girls at bus stops, girls in diners, girls in school uniforms, and Clinton in every single frame. Sometimes smiling, sometimes talking, sometimes just watching. One of the photos was of a girl with braids and a red scarf. On the back, Bertie's cousin. April 1962. Bertie gasped and stood from the table. Tears welled in her eyes. She walked to the back door, breathing fast. "I didn't know he had proof," she said. "I didn't know he kept it." Neither did I. This wasn't just evidence. It was insurance. A sick man's version of power, even after death. Then I plugged in the flash drive. Took a minute to load. Inside was one single audio file. Labeled, "For the boy." Press play. Clinton's voice filled the room. But this time he wasn't smug. He was old, tired, wheezing between sentences. "Elijah, if your mother's told you anything about me, I'm sure it was all hate. That's fine. Maybe I earned that. But blood is blood. And I want you to know I never meant to hurt you. Just remember, not everything she says is the truth. People lie to protect themselves." The voice paused, then chuckled. "And secrets. Secrets have a funny way of sticking around. I left a few for her to find. Let's see if she's woman enough to share them." Blick. The file ended. Bertie cursed under her breath. Lacey sat pale and shaking. I just stared at the screen. Because I realized something then. Clinton wasn't just a predator. He was a collector. Of silence. Of fear. Of proof. And now, every piece of that horror sat on my table. The question was, what would I do with it? Because if I brought it to the police, dozens of women might finally get justice. But if I did, Elijah's life could be shattered. His name tied forever to a man we all wished had stayed dead. That night, I sat with the folder in my lap, the photos beside me, the weight of it all pressing down. Then the phone rang. It was Elijah. "Hey, Mama," he said. "Just checking in. Everything okay?" I stared at the notebook in my hand. And I said, "No, baby. There's something you need to know. Because if there's one thing I've learned, the truth might hurt, but silence destroys. My son wanted to burn the evidence, but I did something else instead. There's a certain kind of quiet that comes after you tell your child something that could change how they see the world forever. It's not silence, it's heavier than that. It's like a thunderstorm paused mid-air. Like the whole world is holding its breath. That's how it felt the moment I finished telling Elijah about the safe. Photos. The flash drive. The words his grandfather left behind. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just listened. And when I was done, he said 5 words I wasn't expecting. "I want to burn it all." I drove to Cincinnati that weekend. The box of horrors sat locked in the trunk, wrapped in a thick gray blanket. Bertie begged me not to go alone, but I needed to face this with Elijah. Lacey offered to drive with me, but I said no. This wasn't her pain to carry. Not yet. Elijah met me outside his dorm. He was taller now, stronger in the shoulders, but there was still that same softness in his eyes, the same boy who once built snowmen and whispered, "Grandpa hurt Mama." We hugged longer than usual. Then we went to a nearby park. A quiet place by a small lake, with a fire pit used for student gatherings. I laid the folder on the picnic table. The notebook, photos, flash drive, all of it. He stared at them for a long time. "Why didn't you throw this away?" he asked. I took a deep breath. Because some women don't get to forget. They don't get to just move on. And the truth. It might be ugly, Elijah, but it matters. He didn't answer. He just picked up one of the photos. Of Marla Drew, young and frightened, barely older than a child, and held it in his hands. Then he said, This doesn't belong to us anymore. That night I thought he was going to do it. Burn everything. Set fire to the notebook, the evidence, the history. But instead, he made a call. To a local journalist he trusted. A woman who'd spoken at a recent campus event about justice and restorative truth. Her name was Tamara Cole. She arrived the next morning. Young. Clear-eyed. Carried herself like someone who'd seen too much to be shocked anymore. We handed her everything. No conditions. No deals. Just the truth. Bleeding. Heavy. I'll protect the names of the survivors, she promised. And I'll make sure the world knows what he did. Then she looked at me and said, "Do you want to be named in the story?" And for the first time in my life I said, yes. Because I was tired of being that woman. Tired of whispers. Tired of silence. Tired of protecting the reputation of a man who never gave me peace. The article ran a week later. Front page of the local paper. Then it hit national news. The grandfather's secret. A Kentucky family's fight for truth after a lifetime of abuse. There was a photo of me on the porch, holding Elijah's hand. The story went viral. More women came forward. Names I'd never heard. Stories I'd never imagined. Each one like another brick removed from the wall Clinton had built to hide behind. But it wasn't all applause. Some people hated me for speaking. You should have kept it quiet. Why ruin the family name? Even Edgar's sister, who hadn't spoken to me in years, sent a message that read, "He's dead. Let it go." But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Because one of those photos, one of those names, was a girl from Elijah's old middle school. She came to my house days after the story broke. Said she'd never had the courage to speak. But when she saw my face on the front page, she decided it was time. And when she testified to the state task force about what Clinton had done when she was 12, I knew we had done the right thing. Elijah changed after that. He became quieter, but in a strong way. He wrote essays, attended panels. He even invited Lacey to speak at a school event about inherited pain, healing, and truth. Together they built something beautiful out of something cruel. But one day, 3 months later, I found him on the porch, holding the last letter Clinton had sent. The one with those cruel words. "You think he was trying to break us?" he asked. He nodded. "Then why do I feel stronger?" Smiled. "Because the truth doesn't break us, son. It sets us free." That fall, Elijah did something I didn't expect. He legally changed his last name, Folder, to Drew. He said it was to honor his sister. To carry a name that wasn't soaked in fear. I supported him. So did Lacey. And at the name change hearing, when the judge asked if he was sure, he stood tall and said, "My grandfather gave me his blood. But I choose who I become. And I choose to stand with survivors." It's funny. I spent most of my life thinking the past would always be a prison. But sometimes when you open the door and let the light in, it becomes a bridge. And now we were walking forward. Not perfectly. Not without pain. But together. That Christmas, for the first time in over 40 years, our house was full. Lacey was there. Hope was there, running around with tinsel in her hair. Bertie brought a whole pecan pie. And Elijah, he gave a toast. To truth. To women who speak. And to grandmothers who never gave up. But just as I thought the chapter had closed, package arrived. From a nursing home in Tennessee. Inside, a letter addressed to me. Written by a woman claiming to be Clinton's first wife. His first wife had a secret she took to the grave. There are some names you never expect to hear again. Especially when they were buried in whispers before you ever came into the picture. So when I opened that worn brown package from Tennessee, and saw the name Lenora May Alder, scrawled in shaky handwriting across the envelope, I almost dropped it. Lenora. Clinton's first wife. The woman who vanished from the family story long before I ever entered it. The one nobody talked about. Not even Edgar. Whenever I asked, Clinton would just say, "She left. Couldn't handle a real man." I should have known then. It wasn't her who walked away. It was him who shut the door behind her. The letter inside was dated 2 months before Clinton's death. It was addressed to me. The handwriting was weak, like it had been written by someone holding the pen between pain and time. It read, "Dear Florence, if this finds you, then the world has changed enough for truth to matter. I don't know if you remember me, or if anyone ever told you about me, but I was Clinton's first wife. Before the medals, before the children, before he knew how to hide what he was. He broke me. Not all at once, but in pieces, quiet pieces, the kind nobody notices missing until they're gone. He told me I was lucky, that other women wished for a man like him, that my silence was loyalty, that my bruises were lessons. And I believed him, until the day I didn't. The day I found a letter in his drawer, addressed to a girl named June, a girl who wasn't even 16. I left that night, took nothing but my Bible, my mother's ring, and the truth. I stayed hidden for years, changed my name, worked at nursing homes under fake papers. But I always kept one thing. Proof. Proof of what he did. Not just to me. To others. Girls. Anyone too small to fight back. It's in a box. Blue one. Hidden beneath the floorboards of room 4 at Silver Pines nursing home. Under the bed frame. Taped in plastic. If he's dead, I beg you, go get it. Burn it if you must. Or use it. But please, don't let him be remembered as anything less than what he truly was. A monster. Yours in truth. Lenora May Fletcher Alder. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called Elijah. He came the next morning. We drove 6 hours south to Silver Pines. It was quiet when we arrived. A small white building tucked off an old country road. Smelled like Lysol and worn leather and the last chapter of people's lives. Room 4 had already been cleaned out. Lenora had passed just days before the package arrived. But the bed frame was still there. And when we lifted it, there it was. A wooden slat with one corner that creaked loose. We pried it open. Taped beneath it in thick plastic was a small blue box. The kind you'd expect to find perfume in. Inside, stack of Polaroids, cassette, a folded-up newspaper article, and a ledger. Clinton's ledger. Mounts. Even initials of people who helped him. Teachers, bus drivers, church officials. All documented in his spidery handwriting. Some of those people were still alive. Some were still working with children. Felt sick. Elijah stared at the ledger. Then at me. Then said, "This can't just sit in a box anymore." We contacted Tamara Cole again. She was stunned. We handed it all over. No red tape. No lawyers. Just raw truth. She went public with it. Hard. This time it wasn't just a local scandal. It was national. Headlines exploded. Whistleblower grandmother and son uncover decades-old abuse ring in small-town America. First wife's dying letter leads to break in cold case abuse investigations. Within 2 weeks, 2 school officials were arrested. 3 more stepped down. 5 victims who had never spoken came forward. And Lenora May Alder, became a hero. Quiet one, but a hero. Elijah started a non-profit with Lacey called the Drew Light Project. Focused on survivor advocacy, education, and helping families rebuild after generational abuse. He never once used his grandfather's name again. Hope, Lacey's daughter, called him Uncle Eli. She didn't know the whole story yet, but one day she would. And when she did, she would know the truth triumphed. Because of women like Lenora. Because of daughters like Lacey. Because of sons like Elijah. And maybe, because of grandmothers like me. The night after the news aired, I sat on my porch alone. The stars were brighter than usual. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Lenora, for not letting it die with you." Then I smiled. 'Cause I knew. The story wasn't over yet. Not for us. Not for the women still watching from the shadows. And definitely not for the last person who still hadn't come forward. Because the very next morning, got a letter, this time, from someone who used to call Clinton Dad. The other son who grew up in silence just broke it. Sometimes pain doesn't come with a scream. Sometimes it's a quiet knock. Soft envelope. A trembling hand that finally dares to write what the mouth has never said. That's how it was when I opened the mailbox and saw the letter. There was no return address. No markings. Just my name. Florence Alder. Written in sharp, deliberate handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a folded letter and a single photograph. The letter was short, but what it said made my knees buckle. Dear Florence, my name is Mason Alder. I'm Clinton's son, not Edgar's brother. I'm from another family. Secret one. He told my mother never to speak of me. And for most of my life she didn't. But she died last year. And when she did, she left me this photo. And the truth. She said, find Florence. She'll understand. So here I am, reaching out, hoping it's not too late. I'm ready to talk. I turned the photo over in my hands. A black and white snapshot, faded at the corners. A little boy standing beside a woman on a porch I didn't recognize. And behind them in the shadows, Clinton, leaning against the doorframe, cigarette in hand, smile twisted like he owned the world. And now, that world was crumbling. Called Elijah first. He was quiet on the line. Then he said, let's meet him. So we did. 3 days later, in a small diner off I-65, just outside of Bowling Green, Mason was waiting at a corner booth. Mid-50s. Worn face. Looked like a man who had carried too many years without dropping a single one. He stood when he saw us. We shook hands. And then we sat. I wasn't supposed to exist, Mason said, stirring his coffee. My mom, Annabelle, met him at a roadside bar when she was 22. She said he charmed her. Told her his wife didn't understand him. Told her he wanted to start over. Clenched my jaw. He continued. She got pregnant with me in '69. He gave her a house in Tennessee. Came by once a week. Sometimes twice. Told her he had business trips. Told her to keep her mouth shut. Did he ever hurt you? Yes. Mason looked down. Yes. But not like how he hurt you. Not like what I've read. He was cruel but calculated. Never left marks. Just fear. And silence. He slid something across the table. Small spiral notebook. I found this after my mom died. She wrote everything. The visits. The threats. The promises. Elijah opened the notebook. Page after page of dates, payments, and mentions of the other family. Us. He kept you a secret, Mason said, looking at me. Just like he kept me a secret from you. Felt dizzy. He hadn't just ruined one home. He'd built two and poisoned both. But why now? Elijah asked. Mason leaned in. Because I saw the news. I saw your face, Florence. And for the first time in 50 years I realized. I wasn't the only one. He paused. And maybe if we put it all together, your proof, my mother's words, we can end his legacy for good. Not just legally, but morally. He nodded. Because that's what this had become. Not revenge. Not spite. But a reckoning. Over the next month we worked together. We met with journalists, lawyers, and survivors. Mason shared his mother's journal. Lacey helped organize support meetings for women across 3 states. And Elijah, my beautiful brave son, stood before crowds and told the truth with a clarity that made people cry. Each of us held a piece of the same shattered puzzle. But together, we made a picture. Of justice. Of memory. Of warning. One night, after a press conference, Mason pulled me aside. You know, he said quietly, I always wondered what it would have been like to have a sister. I smiled at him. You do, I said. Now. He looked at me, eyes glassy. Then we hugged. And for the first time in his life, he belonged. But just as we were beginning to feel peace, the phone rang. It was the Kentucky State Attorney's office. They wanted to meet. Not just about Clinton. Not just about the other men in his circle. But about a living accomplice. Someone we knew. Someone close. And the name they said on the phone made me drop the receiver. Because it wasn't just a stranger. It was someone I once called family. The person who helped Clinton was living right under our nose. There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't come with a knife. Comes with a handshake. Friendly smile. A casserole left at your door when your husband dies. That's what this was. When the Kentucky State Attorney's Office called and gave me the name of Clinton's accomplice, I didn't believe it. I said, "You must have the wrong person." They didn't. They repeated it. Low. Certain. Roberta Jane Alder. Known as Birdie. I couldn't breathe. Not my best friend. Not the woman who held me after the funeral. Who helped raise Elijah when I couldn't get out of bed. Who whispered, "He was a monster," when I finally told her what Clinton had done. She'd been with me through everything. But apparently, she'd been with him too. The official came to my home that night. A woman named D.A. Richards. Mid-40s, sharp jawline, eyes like steel. He showed me the file. Tape phone calls. Old letters. Deposits into a joint account. Birdie had been on Clinton's payroll, under the table, for years. Small amounts. Monthly. Labeled as care work and consultation. But the story those numbers told was far more wicked. According to the investigation, Birdie had once lured at least 2 teenage girls into the Alder household under the guise of church mentorship. One of those girls had testified, saying Birdie offered her a safe place to talk about boys and sin, only for Clinton to corner her later that night. I was shaking. Elijah sat stone still. Lacey sobbed in the corner. Birdie. The one person I had trusted after Clinton. The one who brought pie on Sundays. Who knitted Elijah's baby blanket. Who sat beside me during my mastectomy and whispered scripture. And yet, she had known. Not just suspected. Known. And she helped cover it. She won't be arrested yet, D.A. Richards said. But she's under formal investigation. We need a statement from you. Anything that connects her more directly. I couldn't speak. My whole body felt frozen. Because in the back of my mind, I remembered something. A night in 1987. I'd come home early from a grocery run. Walked in through the side door. And saw Birdie sitting with Clinton in the den, laughing. Too close. When she saw me, she jumped. Said she was just helping with taxes. I never thought twice about it. Till now. That night I couldn't sleep. Birdie had been the one person who stayed after Edgar's death. She'd cleaned out the attic with me. She'd helped me sell Clinton's suits. She'd promised she'd never leave me alone with the weight of that man's shadow. But all this time, she'd been keeping the lights off, not turning them on. The next morning I drove to her house. I didn't call. Didn't warn her. Just pulled up, got out and walked straight to her door. She answered in her usual pink robe. Cup of coffee in hand. "Flo," she said, smiling. "What a surprise." I slapped the envelope into her chest. She caught it, stunned. "This you?" I asked, my voice shaking. She opened it. Read the cover page. Her face drained. And she nodded. "I was scared," she whispered. "He had dirt on me. Letters. Things from my past. If I said anything, he promised he'd ruin me." "You ruined yourself," I snapped. "No," she said, trembling. "He already had. I tried to survive." I stared at her. This woman I loved like a sister. "I needed you," I said. "All these years. I needed the truth." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry, Florence. Truly am. I was weak. And I thought silence would keep me safe." I turned away. Because she didn't understand. Silence doesn't keep you safe. Just makes you another weapon. Back at home I broke down. Not just for what she'd done, but for who she pretended to be. The betrayal cut deeper than Clinton's. Because Clinton had always been a monster. Birdie had been my shelter. And she used that shelter to hide the storm. Elijah didn't speak for hours. Then he looked at me and said, "We press charges." And we did. Alongside 5 other women. Birdie was formally charged with aiding and abetting abuse, obstruction, and negligence. The trial date was set. She pled guilty. Didn't fight. Didn't cry. Just bowed her head like a woman already buried. I didn't attend the sentencing. Elijah did. So did Lacey. They said she looked smaller, older, hollowed out. And when the judge read the verdict, 5 years minimum, she simply whispered, "Tell Florence." I never stopped loving her. But I didn't believe that. Because love that hides monsters is not love. That chapter broke something in me. But it also taught me the final lesson I needed. You can survive monsters. But you must also survive the ones who hold the door open for them. And just when I thought the past had finally let me go, a knock came at my door. A girl, no more than 20, eyes red, hands shaking. She said, "I think he was my father." The final twist. I gave her what no one gave me. I stood in the doorway, staring at the young woman. Rain had soaked through her thin hoodie. Her lips were trembling, but her eyes, those eyes were steady. Not wild, not lost, but determined. She said it again, softer this time. "I think Clinton Alder was my father." And just like that, I knew this story would never truly be over. Not for me. Not for Elijah. Not for the girls who still walked this earth carrying the shadow of a man we spent years trying to erase. I stepped aside. "Come in," I said. She hesitated, then walked in slowly, looking around the living room like it was a museum of ghosts. I offered her a towel, blanket, place to sit. She told me her name was Nia, 31, college student in Memphis. Her mother had passed from breast cancer 2 months ago. And before she died, she left behind a journal. In it, she wrote about a man named Clinton Alder. Older, controlling, secretive. He had met her in 2002. Told her he was single. Said he couldn't have children. Disappeared after a year. She never told anyone. Until she told Nia with her last breath. "I didn't come for money," Nia said. "Or headlines." She pulled something from her pocket. It was a DNA report. She'd tested herself against a genealogy database. Elijah had once submitted a sample for medical purposes years ago. They matched. Half-siblings. Nia was telling the truth. I brought Elijah over that same evening. He stared at Nia for a long time. Then he reached out and hugged her. Just like that. No fireworks. No drama. Just 2 souls who didn't ask for the blood in their veins. But were trying to make peace with it anyway. I didn't have answers for Nia. But I gave her something I never had when I was young and afraid and holding secrets that hurt too much to say out loud. I believed her. I gave her safety. And I gave her truth. I told her who Clinton really was. I didn't protect his name. Or soften his crimes. I told her the whole ugly, brutal truth. And when I finished, she said thank you. But then she asked, was he all bad? Every piece. I sat with that question for a long time. And then I said, no. But the good parts didn't save anyone. The bad parts destroyed lives. And that's what we remember, because that's what mattered most. She nodded. And for the first time since she arrived, she smiled. We spent the next week together. Talking, cooking, laughing even. It was strange. How healing can come in the form of someone you never expected. Elijah taught her how to make his favorite stew. Lacey braided her hair. Hope showed her how to plant herbs in the garden. And me. I told her stories. Not just of the pain, but of the strength. The kind that makes you stand back up. The kind that lets you speak. Even when your voice shakes. Nia stayed in touch. She joined Elijah and Lacey's nonprofit, the Drew Light Project, as a coordinator for youth outreach. She became the voice for girls born of silence. And every time I saw her speak, I saw Lenora, I saw Marla, I saw myself, but more than that, saw hope. A year passed. The world kept turning. The headlines faded. But the healing didn't. Elijah got married to a teacher from Louisville. Lacey opened a small counseling center. Hope turned 10 and wrote an essay about the bravest woman she knew. She read it at school. It was about me. Cried. Hard. But not from sadness. From pride. From knowing that every scar I carried became a path someone else could follow and heal from. I still sit on that same porch. Same rocking chair. Same sun setting behind the hills. But I'm not haunted anymore. Not by Clinton. Not by what he did. Not by who betrayed me. Because I made a choice. To live loud. To love fiercely. To never again protect the names of the wicked. To tell my story now. Over tea. Schools. On stages. And I always end with the same line. We may not get to choose the monsters in our bloodline, but we do get to choose who we become. And I chose to be free. Thank you for being with me through my journey. If this story touched you in any way, I'd love for you to do a few simple things. Please like this video. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss powerful stories like this. Turn on the notification bell, it really helps. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know who's sitting with me on this porch from across the world. Until next time, stay brave, stay kind, and never be afraid to speak.